The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 137.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
As when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Position this.
Wearing a red fin.
Fantastic.
Hell, Scottish. I can complain about things.
Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 10th Doctor story, the Sontaran Stratagem. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
Howdy, Dom, and I'm glad you're back.
Well, I got stuck in the time vortex for a little bit.
But back in 1864, was it? Something like that?
Yeah, 1863.
63.
I was stuck on the battlefields of Gettysburg. Actually, I was actually at Gettysburg for vacation with my family. So that would be a really interesting Doctor story.
Keep your head down.
Yeah, exactly.
The Doctor at Little Round Top. So before we get into today's episode, I do want to, as I sometimes do, ask you if you could please write a review on Apple Podcasts. I've been checking that, and there have been some really great reviews from folks, some of you newer listeners especially. But even if you've been listening for a long time and haven't written a review for the podcast, we really appreciate it. It helps get the word out to others. When Apple sees you've written a review, and then sees other people who like the same sorts of podcasts you do, they say, hey, maybe you'll check this one out. So that helps a lot. It does. And please, in the like vein, share the podcast with your friends and your Doctor Who friends, especially. I think they're the ones that might appreciate it, so that we can help grow our community of listeners as we're heading to a new season of Doctor Who coming up in just a few months.
Was that a pun there in the like vein? Share with its Facebook controls.
Yes. Well, let's call it an unconscious pun.
Okay.
So, before and one last thing, if you're listening to this, maybe you are the sort of person who likes Disney World and visiting Disney parks and have been with your family. I want to recommend a new podcast we've got on the Star Quest Network called The Secrets of Disney. Well, it's sort of a new old podcast. It's a revival of our podcast, and we've got a couple of hosts, Deborah Shaban and Sherry Tamamoto, who are former Disney cast members who used to work in the parks and are still big fans, and they like to visit and go. And they talk about the parks, they talk about their experiences, they talk about great tips for how to get the most out of your visit, but also sort of all things Disney. So check it out. It's The Secrets of Disney at sqpn.com/Disney. All right, let's talk about today's episode. We're talking about the Sontaran Stratagem. This is the 10th Doctor, David Tennant, and we are in the 4th season of the revived series, and this is the 4th episode, and it's the first part of a two-parter. So we have the Sontaran Stratagem now, and then we will next be talking about the Poison Sky. And this features as companions not just Donna Noble, but the return of Martha
As
Jones.
predicted, because she took a superphone with her and said, I'm going to call you when I really need you, and you better show up. So in this episode, she calls. And so lots of Doctor Who is based on current anxieties. Lots of episodes are, and that's very clear in this one. The current 21st century anxiety that's driving this episode is automobile emissions.
I would say it's both. In this episode, it's both automobile emissions and anxiety about technology that takes over or becoming too dependent on technology.
Yeah, that's a standard thing in like these anxiety episodes. One of the common tropes, one of the two ways it tends to get played is, we have a solution to the anxiety, and the solution is worse than the thing we're anxious about.
Right. I mean, this is the second car pollution episode, frankly, with David Tennant with the 10th Doctor, right? I mean, we had the one Gridlock.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, seems to be something that Russell T Davies had a thing about.
Yeah, although I think in Gridlock, it was the gridlock itself that was the dominant anxiety of just being stuck in traffic.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't as much the smog itself. So that's interesting. One thing, of course, we have to mention that this is the first appearance of the Sontarans in New Who, the first time since Classic Who. They're not the last of the major alien races to show up. I think the Zygons were the last.
Yeah, the Zygons
recent
came later. But the Sontarans had the Zygons were really a kind of a one-off villain in Classic Who. They only appeared in the Loch Ness Monster series. That was just their one appearance. But the Sontarans appeared multiple times. So if you had to think of like, what are the three top monsters from Classic Who, it would be the Daleks, then the Cybermen, then the Sontarans.
Okay. And so they show up here with a somewhat new, a related but newer design, and updated of the design as we would hope. The classic Sontaran outfits that they had were actually there was such a bear for the actors to wear that one of them got ill afterward and may have contributed to an early demise, sadly. But the interesting thing with this one is they've made the Sontarans shorter than they were in Classic Who. Did you notice that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
So they do play them shorter, and they make that kind of a thing that comes out in the episode. We maybe bring that up.
All that genetic manipulation to make them better soldiers. They lost height in the process, apparently.
So the enemy will shoot over them.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the handicaps the Sontarans have always had is when they take their helmets off, they look ridiculous. And they look like an egg or a potato. And I like how in this episode, one of the unit soldiers, Ross, hangs a lantern on it and says, "It looks like a baked potato, a talking baked potato." And the Doctor turns to Ross and says, "You look like a pink weasel" to him.
Yeah.
Yes. That was good. So we have in this one the first appearance of the actor Dan Starkey, who plays in this Commander Score, but he will later on return as Strax, who is part of the Paternoster gang. But same actor, so you recognize the voice. So and he does a pretty good job. He's also done some other things that I think even in Classic Who he's shown up. But so he does such a good job. They bring him back.
Starkey is such an unusual name that I wondered if he was maybe the son of Ringo Starr or something, but I looked it up and I didn't find that connection. So not sure.
A little old for that, probably.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. So we start off the story with a reporter. I mean, a classic trope, a reporter who had gone undercover, getting discovered and thrown out of the building, which again, we recently saw that in the first episode of the season. Yeah. Adipose, Atmos, reporters. I don't know. Are they revisiting things? But this one is being thrown out of a place called the Radigan Academy, and she's ranting that Atmos is dangerous, and
we've seen Atmos before as a logo on car windows, but it's never been pointed out till now, so we haven't heard the word uttered in the show.
Yep.
And now we hear it uttered, and we're starting to learn its significance, and the first thing that's significant about it is it's dangerous.
Right, and this is an interesting thing that Russell T. Davies liked to do as the showrunner is to hint at the future stories by putting little Easter egg clues in preceding episodes, things that don't get mentioned but are in the background, and that just seems to be a thing he really enjoyed doing throughout Doctor Who.
He's such a bad wolf.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you bring up bad wolf, but it's interesting too because this isn't the end of the season. Usually it's hinting things. It's the ongoing story arc for the whole season, but this is something where it was kind of a throwaway in other episodes leading to the middle of the season.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we've had other things like that this season that, we've seen other clues that pay off before the end of the season. And I like that. I like not knowing, there's the thing that's pointing to the season end. It's I don't know when it's going to pay off.
Right.
Right. And it's also means that the episodes are not standalone, that they're all part of an ongoing story, and that's pretty good too. So it's the ATMOS stands for Atmospheric Omission System, not emission system, but omission system. I'm not sure.
The atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, is this one of those things where the bad guy puts the clue for the evil plan right in plain sight where nobody sees it? We're going to omit your atmosphere and you will die.
Yeah.
It also is apparently not only is it some sort of catalytic converter enhancer, but it's a GPS or sat nav, which is how they refer to it in Britain, and some sort of auto drive unit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it controls like everything. And I love it where, and we're used to our, you'd use Google Maps or something like that, and it always says you've reached your destination. Oh no, this is your final destination.
Yeah. In a happy voice, but it's still menacing.
Yep. Yes. But yes, so Radigan, after the reporter leaves in her Atmos equipped car, contacts he's this young guy, Luke Radigan, American, and
who is suspiciously short.
He is, isn't he? And he contacts the Sontarans. We don't know there's the Sontarans yet, but his alien overlords, and he asks him to kill the reporter. And so the Atmos drives her into a body of water of some sort where she drowns.
Chappaquiddick, sir.
Exactly. Talk about 50th anniversary of things.
By the way, her name is, the way they pronounce it on screen is Jo Nakashima. And she's apparently of Japanese descent. And I'm going, why are they pronouncing it Nakashima? Shouldn't it be Nakashima?
Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking. I'd be curious to know if British pronounce Japanese names differently than Americans.
Well, and it could also be too, how many names are there where over time the pronunciation is shifted from the original, and if that's kind of what they're trying to do there.
Perhaps
it could be. We have so much Japanese here, culture, Japanese restaurants, Japanese people, Japanese tourists here in Southern California. I've studied some Japanese, and although I've never specifically looked up the pronunciation of the name Nakashima, I've always heard it as Nakashima.
Yeah, I mean, any of the Japanese words that end in shima. I mean, that's how you say shima, not Nakashima. Yeah, that was interesting. So we after she dies, that's the end of the teaser. We get to Donna is now flying the TARDIS. The Doctor's letting Donna pilot the TARDIS,
and there's a little bit of setup for the Dr. Donna.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. Where Donna takes on aspects of the Doctor in herself, and then he gets that call. You mentioned, Jimmy, the call on the superphone from Martha, and they show up. I'm bringing you home to Earth. Where he could have just said, I was just there. I was in Pompeii, but whatever.
Yeah.
So the Doctor lands, and I'm wondering how long has it been since the Doctor and Martha have in Martha's time since the Doctor last saw Donna.
For
Martha.
Donna, we know that it's only been a couple of days,
right?
Because
we don't even know how long it was before that, do we?
Right.
Well, if the series is set at this point a year in our future and it tracks in real time, then you would have it would be over a year, because after Martha left, we had the Christmas special that introduced Donna, and then we had
the Christmas special with Donna was the year before Martha.
Yeah.
Donna's Christmas special was before Martha, and then we had the Martha season. Then we had a gap before the next Christmas special, which was Voyage of the Damned.
Yeah.
And then we had Donna reintroduced. So it's should be a number of months at least.
Yeah. According to the TARDIS Wiki, it's 2009, which is a year, which the broadcast of this was in April 2008. So that's the difference there. So about a year. So we could just assume it's been about a year that they've been apart.
And Donna's we know some time has passed because Martha's a full doctor now. She's no longer a medical student, and she's joined a unit.
And she's gotten engaged to Milligan, who is the guy that we saw in the Year of Hell that she encountered.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so she's joined Unit, and apparently Unit sort of advanced her doctoral studies because of experience in the field. Is what she said.
Also, this is I believe this is the first appearance of UNIT in Revived Who. It has a new leader. They didn't bring back Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier. And it also has a new meaning for its name. In Classic Who, UNIT was the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, but here its acronym has been changed to mean Unified Intelligence Task Force. Apparently, it's not being run by the United Nations anymore, or they didn't want it called that.
UN probably gave them a call and said, "No, that's got to change."
In fact, that's what happened is they received a request from the United Nations not to have the acronym be United Nations. Although, in fact, in the script, they do refer to funding by the United Nations. Martha mentions it.
One thing you mentioned the first time, I thought what was that? The Slitheen episode, the first Slitheen episode where they nuke all the people. I thought that UNIT was involved there, but it was just like you see them and then they get fried by their little badges.
Yeah, I think it's been mentioned, but we haven't had an active UNIT story.
Correct. This is the first story where UNIT is a central focus versus mentioned and you see a figure to involve.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things I like is they do bring back a lot of old UNIT stuff in this. You'll notice whenever they're talking on the walkie-talkies, they will use the old style UNIT language.
Greyhound.
They'll say Greyhound 16 to trap 1 and Greyhound 40 to trap 1 and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, and they mentioned that the Doctor worked for UNIT back in the 70s, or was it the 80s?
The UNIT dating controversy.
Yeah, that was nice. The dating controversy.
Yeah, we've talked about
and
that.
he never resigned.
Right. Yep. Right. So I want to go back to Donna and Martha meeting for the first time, because the Doctor sort of assumes that they're going to fight over him. I'm not sure why, but he sort of assumes that they're going to be catty.
Is it that they're going to fight over him, or they're just going to fight?
They'll be jealous of each other. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like the fact that doesn't happen here, because we've had situations where companions have met and been catty with each other, you know, at least initially, like with Rose and Sarah Jane Smith.
Exactly.
And so it's nice to have companions just hit it off right from the beginning at the Doctor's expense.
Yes.
And, yeah, exactly. And actually start poking at him. He's like, okay, maybe it would better if you fought.
Yes, yeah. But they're talking about how skinny he is and that sort of thing. So that was pretty good. And then after they have their little reunion, Martha calls in UNIT to raid the Atmos factory in search for illegal aliens, which I thought was a little funny, because the aliens they're looking for aren't coming from another country. They're looking for like actual aliens from another planet. Mm-hmm. And then Donna makes an interesting comment. She, as Martha runs off to lead this raid, she says, is that what you did to her? Turn into a soldier? She says to the Doctor. Yeah,
I like seeing Martha as an action hero here. It really emphasizes her self-actualization, and it fits with her arc and the eventual payoff of her arc. When we last see her, as the 10th Doctor is regenerating, she's at that point married to Mickey, so her current engagement isn't going to last, but she is in full-on action hero mode with Mickey at that moment.
Well, and also
fighting a Sontaran, incidentally.
Yeah. It also plays into the Doctor's his uncomfortableness with having the companions, because that's always kind of a balance, especially with the 10th Doctor, where he knows he needs a companion, but he always seems to radicalize them in one way or another.
That's something I was going to mention is does the Doctor always leave his companions worse off, at least in New Who, worse off than when he found them? You've got
Rose,
who ends up in a parallel dimension. You could argue that she's better
with a
off.
Dr. Boy toy.
Yeah. And a rich dad. So maybe
her parents back together and everything. Yeah. So,
but then Martha, who's been turned into a soldier, Donna, who gets her memory wiped and she becomes the Dr. Donna and all that sort of stuff. Then you have Amy and Rory, who gets left back in time. You get Clara, who's killed.
Ish.
Ish.
That was Clara's own fault.
Yeah.
Well, but being with the Doctor, it's not so much that it's the Doctor's fault, but just being a Doctor's companion, the companions don't usually end up in a good place.
No.
Yeah. Bill gets turned into a Cyberman and then a nanobot monster who's happy.
Right.
And
right.
Nardole comes out pretty well.
He does. Yeah. Yeah. So I just thought that was something that occurred to me as Donna was noting that Martha is now a soldier of sorts.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to challenge the premise. There's nothing wrong with being a soldier. Absolutely nothing. Soldiers are necessary.
Right.
And so Donna is, although on some level the question is understandable, given that Martha is a doctor turning a healer into a killer. Is that what happens with your companions? That's in some ways a legitimate question, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a soldier. And as this episode goes along, the doctor very unflatteringly begins showing irrational anti-military prejudice. Which is only topped by Peter Capaldi. I mean, there were some tensions between the doctor and the brigadier, and the doctor would chastise the brigadier for being too militaristic. But this is not a flattering side of the doctor.
No, the doctor gets is we'll come to that in just a sec too, because I wanted to mention that too.
I did like, though, when the doctor meets the new head of unit, he salutes him, and the doctor's like, I'm not having a salute. And then Donna says, well, I'll have a salute. And the guy looks over at the doctor, who doesn't
tell him not to.
So he salutes Donna, a civilian. That's great.
That was pretty good, yes. The doctor does note that unit used to be more homespun. I like that, unit wasn't quite so... in the classic unit wasn't quite so high tech and
they were
like this.
Let's just say they were high tech for the time.
Sure.
In classic Who.
It was the 1980s after all, or maybe the 1970s.
70s,
right?
Yeah.
So unit is now a part of something called Homeworld Security, which apparently is an oblique reference to 9/11. Donna also makes a reference to Guantanamo Bay, so there's a little bit of 9/11-ish mentioning here, referencing here in this one. Then we get the premise, which is the reason they're raiding the Atmos plant is 52 people in 11 time zones around the world died simultaneously to the second in cars fitted with Atmos. They were poisoned. Now, Atmos is supposed to reduce carbon emissions to zero and includes sat-nav / GPS. And what interesting thing about this, by the way, is after this episode, O2, which is a British cell phone company, released a sat-nav
it's also
called Atmos.
A molecule.
Well, it is, but they've co-opted it for this purpose. But they released a sat-nav called Atmos. Would you use an Atmos branded sat-nav in your car?
You know,
I wouldn't.
Some executive watched this episode and go, "You've got to be kidding me! We're just about to release that."
Yes, right.
But I will point out, however, you look at the map of where people died. There was nobody in Mountain Time, but there was somebody in San Diego, and there was somebody that looked like it might have been Boston. So sorry, Dom and Jimmy.
I noticed the San Diego dot on the map. Yeah.
People who live in Montana you have 3 roads. Like, do you really need GPS?
We got lots of road. We just don't need GPS to travel down, because the directions are go 150 miles south, turn right, go 50 miles more. You're there.
Exactly. You reached your final destination.
Here in Southern California, we definitely need catalytic converters in our cars, though. They are legally mandated because back in the 70s, we had a poison sky.
Yep.
Yes,
you could see how poisoned it was.
Yep. Exactly.
So when mentioning so they have this discussion. So why would an alien? Because the doctor's like, this is Earth technology, but way advanced, out of its time. So why would someone create this device that removes carbon monoxide from the atmosphere? And so the doctor says, you know how many cars there are on planet Earth, right? 800 million. Imagine that if you control them, you'd have 800 million weapons. And so that's really the basic premise here is the Sontarans are going to invade, and their weapon of choice is taking over all the cars.
Yeah. Though they're only half done, they only have 400 million weapons at the moment.
Yes, the doctor accelerates their plans.
I was gonna say there's people like me in Montana be like, yeah, no, I don't need it.
So I got to ask both of you: have either of you seen the TV show Vikings? Now, there's a reason I asked this. This is relevant. Have either of you seen the TV show Vikings?
I've seen clips of it, and I know of it.
Okay, so we have this next scene where these unit soldiers find a Sontaran cloning tank in the basement of the building.
Yeah, there's a goopy man in the green goop.
Yes, and one of the soldiers is played by an actor named Clive Standen, and I'm looking at him going, I know this guy. He would
Clive
later
Standen, that's really his name for an actor?
That is, well, it is written. It's Clive Staples Lewis.
It's not the Clive part that I'm
stand-in.
It's stand-in for an actor. This is my stand-in right here.
Yes, Clive, the stand-in. But later on, he will play the character of Rollo in Vikings, who is the brother of the main character, Hrothgar Lothbrok. So I'm looking at this guy going, I know this guy. He's much more clean-cut in this role than he will be as a Viking later on. But so we have, they discover the tank, the Sontaran commander, I want to call him Strax, but it's not, Score.
Stahl. General Stahl is the head.
Stahl, that's right, Stahl. I get all my Sontaran names mixed up. He comes down to confront them, and the soldier makes a short joke.
He comes down by transmat. He's apparently up in a spaceship.
Yes. I should have mentioned that. And so the soldier makes a short joke, and the Sontaran responds that words are the weapons of women folk, and thus determines the soldier to be an unfit opponent. Which is
remarkable for a Sontaran to say that, because Sontarans are unisex. They don't have women folk or men folk.
They're clones.
So the only way to make sense of that is he's learned about human culture and the relative, on average, greater strength of men and greater aggression proclivities of men, and is turning the joke back based on a knowledge of human culture, which is remarkably perceptive of Stahl. And I have to say, not for that reason, but just in general, Stahl is for a villain, he's a well-rounded villain. I mean, he comes across as intelligent and in a way charming. He's like when he takes the two soldiers who, for some reason, even though they're unit soldiers, they don't recognize a Sontaran when they see one. It's like, you have met these people before.
Well, and they're looking for aliens. Like,
I know. Yeah. What's you didn't get a pre-mission briefing?
You would think that there would be part of their basic training for unit is, here's the aliens we have met before. Learn them, know them, study them.
Exactly. But when Stahl takes them captive, he's like apologizing. I mean, he's courteous to them, and he's apologizes to them and says, I'm sorry, I hate to take you captive. Death would be more honorable, but we need you for this stratagem we're doing.
Right. And so there's this thing where he tells them to shoot at him. Fire! A soldier gives no warning. Fire! I order you, fire! And their guns don't fire. And he says, "Ha!" Stahl says, "We have a quarter lane signal. It excites the copper surface of the bullet, causing expansion within the barrel, rendering your guns useless." I'm saying that doesn't cause the gun not to fire. That would cause the gun to explode.
Yes, it would be like a jammed shell in the chamber, and it would go bang, just not the way you expect.
It would not go click.
It's just TV writer not knowing how guns work, just like you and I, Father, talked about in Secret to Star Trek last week, where it's Hollywood writer J. Michael Straczynski has Michael Garibaldi firing bullets using a steam pipe, and Gray 17 is missing.
Yep.
Steam pipe.
Yeah, as soon as it did that, you heard the click. It's like, that's not the sound of a bullet that's been expanded in the chamber. Yeah. That's the sound of an empty chamber.
Right. Yes, a click is an empty chamber. So speaking of guns, we have this next scene where these soldiers are taken captive and turned into zombies. We have this next scene where the doctor is looking at this Atmos equipment, and the Colonel Mace, the head of unit, is standing next to him. And the doctor gets, as we had talked about before, gets downright testy and rude to the colonel, who is carrying his service weapon as part of his job.
Yeah, he's like, get away from me, you're carrying a gun.
I don't like people with guns hanging around me. People with guns are usually the enemy in my books. Seriously?
Yeah, and watch some Classic Who. The doctor uses guns. Apparently he's the enemy in Classic Who.
Right. Well, the unit is the good guys. I mean, they've had to use their guns to save the Earth and save the doctor more than once. I mean, come on. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's just virtue signaling on the part of modern PC writers.
Yeah,
who obviously don't understand guns, hence the field they use to expand copper casings.
Right. I mean, even in the 10th Doctor's run, guns have been used, and the Doctor hasn't gotten all freaked out about it, but apparently only when people from Earth use guns. So the Doctor and Martha then have a little argument, and she defends herself as saying that while the Doctor can come and go as he pleases, some people have to stay behind and work from the inside to make things better. And then he sort of like smiles as if that was his intention, is to get her to say that all along or something.
And this reflects poorly on Martha. We have no evidence that UNIT is doing anything bad. Why does Martha need to reform it from the inside? Again,
because they have guns.
More virtue signaling.
Right.
I wonder if the author Helen Rayner. I really wonder if she's a pacifist or what, because I mean it's so much of this kind of language where military bad, guns bad.
So something about Helen Rayner is that she also wrote last season's two-parter, which was the Daleks Take Manhattan episodes, which had its own problems. And in fact, she almost didn't write this. She almost wouldn't agree to write these two episodes based on how poorly the fans reacted to those two. So and Russell T. Davies finally convinced her.
This is better than those.
Yes.
One thing that may play a role, there's been some geopolitical analysis of the attitude towards defense in Europe versus America. And this is not meant to be judgmental in any way. It's just some analysis that's been offered. I think Robert Kagan used the analogy that I'm about to mention as a way of helping explain this. But World War II was a horrific, horrific event. And it was fought in Europe, not America. And that means it left a wound on the European psyche much more profoundly than on the American psyche. And consequently, the thought of another war like that happening in Europe is unthinkable. It's profoundly disturbing. You can't allow yourself to even think about that. And that can lead for some individuals to a kind of all violence is bad, all use of force is bad, just kind of rhetoric, kind of pacifistic rhetoric, even if it isn't full-blown pacifism, but to the kind of knee-jerk stuff we see Doctor Who doing in this episode. By contrast, Americans have not had that experience of having that kind of horrific war fought on our own soil since the Civil War, the American Civil War. And since World War II, we've shouldered the burden in terms of finances and manpower for defending the West. Even though other nations are part of NATO, they contribute men and dollars to NATO or currency to NATO. Really, America is subsidizing all of the European nations' defenses. And that means Americans have to think about defense in a somewhat more robust way if we're the ones who are subsidizing the defense of Europe against Soviet or other aggression. And Kagan, who's a geopolitical analyst, posed a metaphor of, if you're a man who is in the woods with a bear, your native instinct is going to be avoid the bear because the bear is much more powerful than you. And if you are a man in the woods with a bear and you have a gun, your instinct may be more inclined to let's use the gun to get rid of the bear.
Right.
And so that dynamic between Americans who have the practical burden of shouldering the defense of the West, at least most of it, may explain some of why we find some of the anti-gun, use of force rhetoric on Doctor Who as incomprehensible as we find it, because it's not coming from a place of having to shoulder this defense responsibility. It's coming from a place of, we can never even think about having another war like that last one.
Right.
Makes sense.
And certainly it's not universal even within those societies, our society. Or
and
society.
It's not universal here or there. These are just tendencies that manifest in different ways. We both have aggression and we both have pacifism in both our societies. It's just how that plays out given our geopolitical circumstances in history.
Interesting. So Donna is the one who actually finds the clue to what's going on here, their lead into the secrets of Atmos. She finds out because has years working as a temp. The office worker, the office worker is the one who has the clue. She finds an empty file for the sick days recorded, which is a funny little thing. So none of the employees have ever taken a sick day, which is of course impossible. Although I would think that the employees being zombie-like would be a pretty good clue, given the interview that that Martha has with the worker, Tepper.
Yeah, I think the implication is that the factory was originally built without everyone being a zombie, which would explain why they have a sick day folder at all.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then very quickly, everyone at the factory was turned into a zombie, so nobody did office paperwork after that.
Apparently, none of these guys go home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, Trepper said he worked 24 hours a day, so.
Yeah.
And their families don't miss him, so that's
he's got tachycardia.
Yeah. So we have this the history of Atmos. We found out that Luke Radigan from the Radigan Academy invented Atmos. He's a boy genius who invented a search engine, which is the early 2000s equivalent of internet bazillionaire. That's the shorthand for that. At 18,
think Bill Gates, Steve Jobs,
Elon Musk.
Yeah, that kind of person.
Yes. So so the doctor is going to take Russ Jenkins, the unit soldier, with him over to Radigan Academy to talk to Luke Radigan.
And
meanwhile,
just notice the discrepancy here. Ross carries a gun.
Yes.
And a bigger gun than the majors.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor has no problem being around Ross. He even engages in playful banter with Radigan about Ross. It's like, oh, we love Ross. He's awesome.
Well, and the other thing, too, is that when the doctor says, I want someone to drive me over to Radigan Academy, the colonel says, why don't you just take the TARDIS? And the doctor says, oh, we have a unknown enemy. I should take this super time machine with me so that they could use as against us. And the unit colonel calls him on and goes, so you fly around in a weapon, right?
Yeah, you have weapons too. Oh, snap.
Yes. And he calls the doctor on giving orders.
I like the colonel of this one because he gets back to the doctor twice because there's that. And then, doctor says, no orders. And then he salutes. And then the doctor says, no salutes. And colonel goes, well, that was an order.
Yes. Yeah. He calls him on giving orders. Yeah. So, and at the same time now, Martha advises Donna about you have to be careful about the doctor because he's like fire. He's brilliant, but if you stand too close, people get burned.
And she specifically warns. I mean, this comes up because Donna is wondering, should I warn my family about the Atmos systems on their car? And Martha says it wouldn't hurt. And then Martha reveals her, which is interesting that they would do that in the middle of a crisis, because it just part of me, part of my mind immediately goes to, is this the right time to warn them, or would that actually provoke worse dangers if they try to take the thing off their cars?
Right.
But Martha then reveals to Donna what happened to her own family, and not in detail, but basically she communicates they all got really hurt and they're wounded as a result of my interactions with the doctor. And so we get this great scene where Donna comes to the doctor and says she's not coming, she's going home. And the doctor has this whole speech about, oh, well, it's a little soon, but I respect you and I've had a great time with you and blah, blah, blah. And finally the penny drops and he realizes you're just going home for a visit and you're going to be back, right? And she's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, you donkey. She calls him.
Just poke at the whole sappy goodbyes the doctor's had, and it's just like, but this really isn't goodbye, is it?
I was going to show you the 15th broken moon of the Medusa Cascade and the lightning skies of Connor Paluni's world, and she's like, you Dumbo. Yeah. Then she calls him a great big outer space dunce. And because, what's more, you can give me a lift. Come on. Broken moon of what? Oh, I know, he says. And then they drive away. So, as Donna gets home, they drop her off at the corner, and she's walking to her house. We have this kind of, I don't know, I felt like it was a little bit of an odd flashback sequence of this melancholy flashback sequence of Donna's memory. I'm like, why are we seeing this? Like, what is this about?
I know. Well, she's seeing. I mean, this is just my guess, but she like sees a kid who's playing with a ball, and she thinks about one of the children who died at Pompeii that she saw, and similar things. And so she's relating her experiences elsewhere, which have involved tragedy, to her home street that she lives on, and is wondering, will tragedies like that very soon be happening here? And that thought makes her sad.
Well, it makes sense, especially after the conversation with Martha.
With Martha,
she's thinking about all that put together. So no, it actually, now that you mention it, does make a lot more sense than it did initially.
Yeah, because it did seem a little odd in the first. It was great to see Wilf. I mean, I make no secret of the fact that I love Wilf. He is fantastic, and we get this great moment later on where Wilf recognizes the Doctor from the Voyage of the Damned.
Yep.
And then
Mom recognizes him from the Runaway Bride, and Donna doesn't realize the Doctor has met both her mom and Wilf before.
Yeah,
that was a great scene. And then we have the dynamic between Wilf and the mom, and like we have like we've talked about before, yet another mom who just is a battle axe to the kids and to the dad. So but that's being the case.
Oh. There's also in that bit where Wilf is going to the mom, how do you know the Doctor? It's because, and she says he's the man from the wedding, which we saw in the Runaway Bride, but Wilf was not in the Runaway Bride because he wasn't cast yet.
Yeah.
He wasn't, we've talked about how originally the Wilf character was going to be Donna's father, but the actor died. So they came up with Wilf as the grandfather, but then he wasn't at the wedding. Why not? The mother reminds him that at the wedding, Wilf had the Spanish flu. Right. And I'm going, Wilf had the Spanish flu, the one that killed millions and millions of people at the end of World War I? Really? He had that when the wedding was going on?
That's quite a long time to incubate.
Yeah, it's like 10% of global population died or something.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder though if that's kind of become like we might talk about having just the common flu.
Like an idiomatic phrase that just people, instead of people just saying you have the flu, you have the Spanish flu.
I thought it was just an in-joke for people who know what the Spanish flu is, but
it could be. So we find out as the Doctor and Ross, or Jenkins, as he's called alternatively, are driving over to Radigan Academy, that we find out that all government vehicles are fitted with Atmos, even though UNIT knows that there's something dodgy about them. And they can't take the typical government bureaucracy. We know there's a problem, but regulations are regulations. We've got to have this thing on there. It seems very like such a bad idea. I mean, just from a secrecy point of view, putting something in all government vehicles.
Yeah. I can attest to this from personal experience. Just this last weekend, I was signing paperwork at a state park because it's a historic state park. They have a historic dance group that meets once a month, and twice a month, and I'm becoming their new caller. So that means I need clearance as a sort of employee of the state park. So I had to come in and fill out all this paperwork. And as I'm doing it, the guy is apologizing to me because he's saying okay, so this is really, you're going to have to fill out multiple things with the same information. We're trying to get this all streamlined, but this date's from before computers. And so it's inefficient, and we know it, and we're working on it.
Fill out the forms in triplicate and fax to this place and send to that place. And yeah,
that's government for you. We know it's inefficient, but it's the way it is. So we'll have to live with it. So the Doctor shows up at Radigan Academy, and he sees them developing technology for living on a hostile planet of some sort. He sees these terraforming technologies, and then notices the nice big teleport pod in the middle of Radigan's office. And so he just wanders over and transports up to the Sontaran ship. I do love this line because, being a dad, I love a good pun. The Sontaran yells, "Intruder alert!" And the Doctor says, "Intruder alert! How do you get in? In through the window!"
Great dad joke.
And then he accuses the Sontaran. One Sontaran gets through before the Doctor shuts down the teleport pod. And he accuses the Sontaran of not typical Sontaran behavior, hiding behind teenagers, not fighting openly.
Yeah.
Because Sontarans are big on honor.
This is General Stahl who's down here.
That's right. And then the doctor notes that the Sontarans' one weakness is the probic vent in the back of their neck. It's a feeding tube, and it requires them to always face their enemy into battle. But the doctor uses a racket to bounce a ball off the back of his head, off the probic vent, which is quite a shot. That was actually bravo to the doctor on that one. And so they escape out the door as the Sontarans. This
probic vent weakness is not really plausible. Even if they do feed through their mouth, through their probic vent, that's like the equivalent of their mouth. And it's a piece of machinery. So it's not, when you hit it with a tennis ball, it's not even like being socked in the mouth.
Well, and it's just simple, too, as if they did have something like that, wouldn't they have something like, say, maybe a metal cover that could be put over it?
Yeah.
Yeah, like put a lid. But the Sontarans have not invented the lid.
The lid, yeah. We have this superior lid technology here on Earth.
So, meanwhile, they're escaping in their Atmos-equipped vehicle, which they take control of, and the doctor undoes using the classic Kirk stratagem of telling it to do the opposite of what it's supposed to do, and having it explode.
And the dialogue is not great here because he's like talking to the Atmos and saying, okay, so you're programmed to do the opposite of whatever I say, so you're going to ignore whatever I say, right? And the Atmos confirms it. And then he says, I order you to drive into the river, to get it to not drive them into the river. So it's reverse psychology. But if you just established it's going to ignore whatever you say, that's not do the opposite of whatever you say. That's ignore whatever you say. Yeah. So if you say drive us into the river, it's going to ignore that and drive into the river anyway.
Right.
So that could have they needed to fix on the dialogue.
Is it you're programmed to ignore everything I say, right? Cricket. There's your answer.
Meanwhile, Martha's been taken captive by the zombie unit soldiers and is being cloned. So the others are just hypnotized, but they're cloning her.
Yeah,
because
security clearance.
No. This is actually pretty. There are good reasons for this. With the clones, they're clearly zombies. I mean, when Martha interacts with the Polish guy, it's clear he's under some kind of mental control.
That's true.
But they want something more sophisticated for Martha. They need her to do something that requires her to not be immediately perceived as a zombie. So they create a clone and then give her the clone access to her memories.
Right.
The clone has a full personality, but also access to her memories. And since it has a full personality and her memories, it can impersonate Martha much more effectively.
Okay. So the doctor... They escape from the. I do like the fact that when they jump from the Jeep, they dive away from it. And by the way, and waiting for it to explode, and it just zaps.
Nothing happens. So, it just fries. Yeah.
And then we have the cloned Martha, and she's going around looking to. What exactly was she looking for? They were looking for the doctor, or what were they going to use the cloned Martha for? Now that I think about it.
I'm forgetting exactly what the clone does do effectively, though, is Donna calls Martha, or rather calls Martha's cell phone, assuming she's talking to Martha, and tells her a piece of information about Atmos that is important and needs to be passed on to General or Colonel Mace. And the Martha clone says, "Oh, I'll tell him immediately." And General and shuts the phone. And General Mace walks up and says, "Anything up?" And she's like, "Nope, everything's fine."
Right.
So the Martha clone intercepts a piece of information that Colonel Mace needs.
So meanwhile, the doctor has shown up at Donna's house and he's messing with their car with the Atmos converter on it. And the doctor discovers that the converters they create poisonous gas, and it not just removing.
It's not that poisonous. They're standing right there, and none of them are showing toxicology symptoms.
Right.
But the gas is located in a temporal pocket within the device.
Yes,
you got to get time involved because
the pocket is bigger on the inside to hold all that gas.
Exactly. So the Sontarans activate the devices all over the world. Everyone's starting to choke. The doctor is helpless. He's kind of standing in the middle of the road, just looking in all directions. And Wilf, once again, has a tendency to get himself locked in places that will kill him.
Yeah. It's foreshadowing.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is.
I was thinking about this, though. Wouldn't it have been safer inside the car than outside if the car's spewing this toxic gas out the tailpipe? Wouldn't the locked car
apparently
be
the gas
inside?
The gas is coming inside the car. That's the thing.
Yeah.
The gas is also inside, so he can't get away from it. Apparently. And that's where we have the to be continued. Next time in the Poison Sky, the doctor, everyone on Earth dies from smog.
Yeah.
So that's that. So we have this moment where the doctor is completely helpless, and Wilf collapses, and everything seems at its
hopeless
at its nadir. Yes.
Belly of the beast.
Yep. So next time we'll come back. We'll talk about the Poison Sky and the second part of this story. And but in the meantime, first I want any final notes about this episode. I do want to get to some listener feedback before we finish up.
I did laugh. As the poisonous gas is coming out of all these vehicles, including all of Unix's vehicles, they're ordering them to shut them down however possible, and they start shooting the exhaust pipe. Speaking of not just knowing not how guns work, not knowing how cars work.
right.
Yeah. I had I thought there was a nice point where the doctor points out the law of unintended consequences, because he mentions at one point that because Atmos does what it does, it means he's talking to Luke at this point. And he points out that because Atmos does what it does, it improves driving. And so that means more people will be driving and the world's oil supply will run out sooner, not later. And so it was nice to have, there's enough awareness there on the author and or Russell T. Davies' part that, yes, there is the law of unintended consequences. That's something that's often ignored in these TV sci-fi scenarios. Luke is an interesting character. I haven't seen this. I don't think I haven't seen it in years, so I don't have clear memories of this two-parter. I may not have seen it since it originally broadcast. So I'm going to be interested to see the next part because Luke is such an interesting character. He is short like the Sontarans, and my notes says Luke is short and genocidal because he has like no problem with the Sontarans killing all of these humans and taking over Earth.
And in fact, he kind of looks at himself as a Sontaran, where he gets involved.
Exactly. And at the end, the Sontarans are all doing this war chant. They're all going Sontar ha, and they're slapping their fists together on the ha. And Luke joins in that chant, which is totally bizarre if Luke is just a human. So I'm wondering in the next episode, are we going to have a reveal that Luke is some kind of changeling or something and has some kind of Sontaran background, or is even a Sontaran in disguise, like one of the clones, like the Martha clone or something. Also, one thing I liked because of the doctor's involvement, the Sontarans are accelerating their plan. So even though they've only got 400 million of the world's 800 million cars converted, they deem that enough, and they activate their battle plans. And so you have this summons to battle on the space station's announcement system. And as it's telling the soldiers to get ready for battle, because they have this warrior ideology, it's saying, rejoice.
Yeah.
And I like how that would happen with a warrior race. We've got a battle now. Everybody rejoice. And then just another thing on the dialogue level at the very end to hype the drama, the doctor says it's every single car on the planet. And I'm going, but a few scenes ago, you said it was only half.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
right.
Yeah. But still an interesting first episode.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So we've got some feedback from listeners. Going back to episode 131, Partners in Crime, where the first episode of this season, where Donna and the doctor team up for the first time. Kelly Brown writes, I'm so glad you're reviewing the Donna season. She was my favorite companion. I also need to say thank you for mentioning the Big Finish Missy series. Jimmy was right. It is brilliant. I just finished Broken Clock, and I haven't laughed this much in a long time.
I know. Broken Clock is awesome. That's the one It features so there are 4 audio plays in the series. They're all really good, but 3 of them are just over the top brilliant, and that's one of them. It features a TV show. It's an episode of a TV show called Dick Zodiac, America's Most Impossible Killers. And it's and in the episode, the detective who's investigating a series of impossible killings is assisted by D.I. Missy Masters from Scotland Yard in England.
I really have to get this. So that sounds great. Marion Luther writes, Doctor Who had the romance with River Song. She was the best and interacted especially well with Peter Capaldi's Doctor. I would have liked to have seen more of them as a couple traveling through time. That being said, I think the companions should remain as friends. The only part of Tennant's run that I disliked was his romantic relationship with Rose. Interesting point. Thank you. Then on episode 132 on Inferno, Amy Flowers writes, my friend and I are working through some of the Third Doctor stories, and we haven't had Inferno on our list. But after listening to this episode, it's on the list now. Evil AU is all we needed.
Yeah.
So we really liked Liz Shaw as a companion with her cool head and approach to things. It's too bad she wasn't around for longer, but she shined brightly when she was on.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one, Amy. And then from YouTube, Doctor Who Adventures writes, this episode is simply iconic, well-written, brilliantly acted, and beautiful score. Not to mention Karen Gillan and Peter Capaldi came from this story. Great video. Actually, that was on, of course, on the
Fires of Pompeii.
Yep.
Fires of Pompeii. But yes, that was a great episode. And of course, yes, gave us Karen Gillan and Peter
and had
Capaldi.
its own kind of inferno.
Yep,
Exactly. I thought it was nice the way those two were back to back on our show. So, all right. Well, thank you all for that feedback. Before we finish up, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Lindsay S., Ahmad A., David S., Stan S., and Thomas M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows we have at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What do you think of this 10th Doctor story, the Sontaran Stratagem? Let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Leave us some feedback there or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the second part of this 2-part story, The Poison Sky. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, this is your final destination.
Right. This is going to be fun.